Okay, let's do this. 1, 2, 1, 2. Turn the music down. Hey everybody, how are we? Hope yous are well. I want to I had to come out and do this podcast because it's the first chance I've really had. As you know, I've been very busy working. I had to get a job and all that shit, which is fine. It's good. I've news about that, which is good. I'm going to be able to wind it back a wee bit because I'm getting lots of work in with the band. And other things, a few wee writing jobs and stuff like that. Sorry, give me a sec. A few wee writing jobs and everything, and it's very exciting. So I'm going to be able to go into them and say, listen, I can't work as much as you want me to. So that's good. Yeah, so updates, what else? I'm going to be doing, so I'm going to be doing a live stream from the house here on the 25th of March. Yeah, and it's going to be really cool. There's going to be 2 new things. So I'm getting a video, because as I've said to you in the last podcast, I'm going to be putting my solo album out on the streaming services, but only 2 of them. So it's going to be Tidal. I did tell you that, but I'm going to do it in Napster as well, because this is the weird fucking thing. Get this, right? Napster, which is if you think about it, this is all their fucking fault, all this streaming shit, right? They started this, but when they started this, they were giving it all away, remember? And there was that whole big thing, Lars Ulrich from Metallica and all that fuckery. Well, turns out they pay the most of them all now, by a long fucking way. By a long way. Like, they pay even more than Tidal. So, we're signed up in this house to Tidal because Napster don't have a family plan. See, me, Jeannie, and Summer and Lily, my girls, we all use the same family account. And Napster don't have that just yet. I emailed them and they said they don't have it, but we're going to get it soon. So, that's good. I'm happy about that. And whenever they do, I'll go over to them, I think. Yeah, so there's that. So that's really good. So I'm going to do a live stream on the 25th of March, and we're going to drop a video. So my daughter Summer is a filmmaker, and she's going to do me a video for the last song on the album, which is called Crashes Into the Sun, Part 2. So she's going to do a video for that, so we can. It's just a wee thing to celebrate the release of this thing onto another platform, I guess. And then, what was the other thing? Yes, so I'm writing a song at the minute I've actually got it written, I guess, more or less, for Sarah O'Neill, the artist and fashion designer. If you're in my Twitter sphere, you'll know Sarah. If you're in my Instagram, you'll know Sarah. She's a fantastic person and an amazing artist. And as you know, she's released a new piece of art stroke fashion. And she sort of asked me would I write a song for it. So I've just jumped in both feet. I can nearly write a fucking album for the story that she's given the whole character that this is all based around, a whole backstory, and it's fantastic. So I was very excited to do it. But I've decided that, so I have the song written, I can perform it acoustically, which I'll do it on the 25th of March for my live stream. But whenever I'm going to record it, so I've put together a nice wee band to do it. So and it's all family, which is great. So my cousin Laura is going to play the fiddle. My wife's cousin Joseph Toman is going to play piano. My daughter Lily's going to sing with me, and my other daughter Summer's going to play bass. As they're both fantastic at those things. And Joseph and Laura are obviously seasoned pros at what they do. So that's going to be very exciting, and I can't wait. I can't wait to share that with you. It's a lovely little song. It's not usual for me. You know, it's going to be a bit different. But I'm going to share that. So that's the live stream on the 25th of March. And we're going to do it in the kitchen. instead of out in the studio, because I'm going to bring a couple of my mates into the house. We're going to have a wee drink and a bit of crack. So I hope that's okay. What was the other thing? Oh yes, I wanted to offer congratulations as you, again, if you follow me on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, you'll know that Jeannie, my wife, graduated university. Well, she graduated a while ago, but we went to the ceremony on Friday, and I cried my fucking eyes out because I'm so proud of her. And she did it. What an amazing woman. She did it through some of the hardest times we've ever had, and fostering kids, coronavirus, etc., etc. And she's just something else. So, yeah. So there we go. What else? So gigs, yeah. So I've got some Bonneville's gigs coming up. We've got. I'm just going to read them off my phone. We're going to play Long Good Friday in Santino's on the 15th of April. We're going to play Cookstown Blues. I think it's Rockin' Blues Club. I think it's called. On the 16th, we're going to play the Deer's Head with NASA Assassin in Belfast. On the 23rd of April. They're fantastic. We want to play. We like to play with those guys as much as we can, but we can't always make it work. We're playing the Kilkenny Roots Festival on the 30th of April, which is class. We want to play more gigs down south. We play more gigs in fucking England than we do in our own country. You know that, and we really want to. We really want to put that right. So if anybody knows a gig for us to play down south, please put us in touch with the people and we will contact them. We would like that very, very much. So yeah, so that's the 30th of April, the Kilkenny Festival. And then with a gig in Forestside in May, in the shopping centre. I know it's a weird one, but it's going to be very interesting, something a bit different. So we have a load of gigs coming up. So, but what that has done, it's enabled me to, I'm going to be going to my bosses during the week and saying to them, I can only do a few days for you during the week. You know, and if you want it, you've got it, and if you don't want it, that's fine too. So, you know, they will take it because they're desperate, and I'm happy to have it because I will admit this, having a wee regular income has been nice. Haven't had that for decades, and I think I've kind of gotten used to it, and I would like for that to continue. So there you go. So I think that's all my updates done. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, and I'm writing some. So I'm getting all this different working. So I'm writing some music for a whiskey brand down in Dublin, and I sent them. I should have loaded the track for you. I sent them some music. Actually, I'll just try and do it now. So they asked me for some real gritty, bluesy, sexy music for a whiskey brand thing. So I'm gonna let you hear it. Well, probably not allowed to, but you know what a wild and crazy guy I am. So let me see if I can find it here on my computer. It's just a wee sort of quick minute. I'll just let you have a wee blast of it. Where is it? Is that it? No, let me just... no, that's not going to work. Yeah, okay. So there it is there. So... think. Put it back to the start. Yeah. And I play all the instruments here in the studio. I did it like I did the album. that cool? Very happy with that, actually. So I've another... delete that. So I've another 3 to do them. I'm getting paid. Andy's getting paid for music again. This is awesome. So I'm over the moon. So there we go. I think that's sort of me updated. I can't think of anything else to tell you right now, but if anything comes to mind, I'll let you know at the end. So what are we going to talk about? God help me, I'm going to talk about this Ukraine situation. And before anybody, I'm going to start with this, right? A complete disclaimer. I am not making any apologies for Russia. Okay? This is not what this is, so don't be coming at me saying that I am. I'm not. But one of the things I've noticed, and I have held off because I wanted to get more meat on the bones of this, and one of the things that I've noticed that's lacking in the narrative that is being told is the context for what has created the situation. Now, I am not excusing Russia or Putin or anybody. Evil bastard, horrible thing to do, can't believe they fucking did it. But to not acknowledge that these things have context is childish in the extreme, wouldn't you say? Would you not agree with that? So, it's just, I've noticed that these things haven't been given. There's no context. It's just Putin evil, and that's just the end of it. There's no context for these things, or for what's going on. As if he just decided one day to do this, and he didn't. This has been going on for decades. So I watched an interview with Chomsky, and now this was I think this was just before the invasion. I don't think Putin had invaded at the time, and sorry, I'm just fucking around with something on my screen here. Let me see. There we go. Yeah. So I don't think Putin had invaded at the time. So it was just before the invasion. I think I could be wrong about that. But nonetheless, so as I said, like a complete disclaimer here. Please do not think that I am giving. I want to see Vladimir Putin in front of the Hague for war crimes, but I would like to see a lot of people in front of in the Hague, in the dock in the Hague for war crimes, not just him. So you must, don't be coming at me, don't be accusing me of this, because it's not what I'm saying. And if I misspeak, or if you think I've implied that what he's done is okay or correct or right, I'm telling you now, I'm not saying that. I'm not doing that. It's not what I mean. You're going to have to give me, if you think I've said that, just unthink it. I'm not suggesting that at all. Okay? So, sorry, I've just started fucking about with something on my screen, and I wished I hadn't have bothered. Give me 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Aye, fuck it, that'll have to do. I had it right, and then I wanted to make it better. You know what I mean? One of those. And then there we go. That's better. See, what would annoy me? It was a little thing. And my onset adult ADHD wouldn't let me just let that be. So here we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you the Chomsky interview, and I'm going to stop it and talk about it, what he says. Now, I've sped the interview up because, as you know, Chomsky is very slow and drolly and sounds like he's bombed all the time. So I've sped the interview up, which brought it down from about 9 minutes to 5.5 minutes or something like that. So he talks kind of fast like that there, but it's not pitch shifted. It stays the same pitch. So let's do this. And as I said, I will stop the video from time to time to give you some context of what it is that he's referencing. Is that okay? Can we do this? Okay, let's go. Chomsky. This is just the end of February.
Well, it goes deep. A large part of the conflict goes back to the decision of the United States, first by George W. Bush, 2008, then reaffirmed by Obama, to invite Ukraine to enter NATO.
Right.
No Russian leader is likely to accept that.
So you hear what he says there? This goes back to Ukraine being invited into NATO. And as he said, no Russian leader would accept that. Now, why? He's going to give you a lot of context. He's going to give you a lot of reasons for why. But I'll give you... So, so the Soviet Union fell in 1997. Okay? So, the Soviet... I'll play a little bit more of the video and I'll stop it again.
Ukraine is far too great geostrategic significance and also historical significance and cultural significance to Russia for Russian leaders, Putin or anyone else, to accept incorporation of Ukraine within a hostile military alliance. Long background to this. Now, this effort by the United States was vetoed by France and Germany.
Okay. So, way back in the times of George Bush, they invited Ukraine to join NATO. Now, since 1997, 14 former Soviet Soviet countries have joined NATO. 14: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Slovenia, Croatia, Montenegro, Albania, North Macedonia, and Bulgaria. Now, is that, you could say, well, aren't they entitled to if they want to join an organisation? Of course they can, that's up to themselves. But the other argument comes at it, should NATO even exist? NATO is a North Atlantic Treaty Organisation that was set up as a response to the Warsaw Pact countries. Okay? As we know. Now, when the Soviet Union fell, there's no need for NATO anymore. It should have been dissolved. Instead, what it turned into was basically a production or a protection racket for the US energy supply, global energy supply markets. This is basically what they did. So, another little bit of Chomsky.
But that didn't mean anything. The United States proceeds with it. Now, there is an agreement, the Minsk II agreement. It's France, Germany, Russia, and Ukraine. If the terms of that agreement were implemented, the crisis would be dampened. It probably would not be taking place. Now,
so he referenced there the Minsk agreement. So the Minsk agreement is this is what I mean. This is what I wanted to tell you, because it is so fucking complicated, as all these things are, and it didn't just start. One of the things that I've noticed is that the clock seems to have started just a week before Russia invaded Ukraine, which, again, I'm going to keep saying this because you're not going to accuse me of fucking siding with with Russia and whatever. They're wrong. I feel my heart bleeds for the people of Ukraine, and if you listen to this whole this podcast, you'll understand where I'm coming from and why I'm presenting you with this context and where my sympathy lies. So when the Soviet Union fell, a part of the agreement that was made was with Boris Yeltsin, that the Soviet Union, NATO wasn't going to expand eastwards. I think the correct sentence, it's not going to expand, move an inch eastward towards Russia. So ever since then, as I've just read out, they've broke that promise, and it was a promise, it was an agreement, 14 times. Again, Chomsky will give you a little bit more detail about this, but the Soviet Union doesn't want Germany Russia doesn't want Germany to reunify, because Germany, especially after World War II, there was 27 million Russians died because of Germany, and that's historical memory that stays with you. I still haven't forgiven the British Empire for the famine, for fuck's sake. So you can understand why the Russians would be cautious about World War II. And this is another part of, as Chomsky mentioned there, the strategic significance of Ukraine. Ukraine has been it's a it's plains, big flat plains, and it has been Russia has been invaded twice through Ukraine. Now, those other countries that I read out to you, I'm looking at the map here. So it's Estonia and Latvia. Okay, they border Russia. They actually touch the Russian border. The rest of them don't. So the next two that are left are Belarus and Ukraine. And if you remember, Russia annexed Crimea, which was a part of Ukraine until Russia annexed it. It's because of, Russia's always had a sort of there's always been a bit of an argument about that. But, so, the Crimea is just a little, in the very southern bit of Ukraine, and it is right on the Russian border. So, those areas Russia has been invaded through. Napoleon invaded Russia through Ukraine, through Crimea, and the Nazis invaded Russia through Ukraine. So, and both of those occasions, both of those massive historical events, the price that Russia paid in treasure and blood was huge. So they have that historical memory. They don't want, and you say, well, that's good. What's that? You say, well, it doesn't matter what they want. I would argue it kind of does. It does matter, because for this reason. One, they're a nuclear power. They're technically a world superpower. Okay. And two, you kind of have to think about your neighbour. Now, I know that Russia has been the empire. So it's like me saying, I don't give a fuck about what goes on in England, or I don't give a fuck because they were the empire here in Ireland. But that would be self-defeating, don't you find? Do you not think that would be a little bit cut your nose off to spite your face? I think it would. And I think there's a bit of that going on here. Now, I understand, so the argument's going to be now, well, of course you want to join NATO. Look what Russia did to Ukraine. So now it sort of doesn't, it puts the argument for joining NATO, puts a bit more meat on the bone, and it does, and I understand it. I get it now, but I didn't get it before. I didn't get it. I didn't get it why Ukraine wanted to do it. I understood why the Americans wanted them to do it. I understood why the military-industrial complex wanted them to do it, so they could flood the country full of weapons and turn Ukraine into Afghanistan in Europe. Why do Ukrainians want this? I don't know. I don't understand. Why the EU seems to be backing this, I have no idea. To me, as Chomsky mentioned, you need to stand up to the US and say, listen, you're not doing this here. Now, we're going to talk about that as well, about they've done it everywhere else, and the wave of sympathy for the fucking Ukrainian people, which is fantastic. It's unbelievable that we can have such charity in our hearts for these poor people who, God love them, they're living through a living fucking nightmare through no fault of their own. But sure, we need to have the same charity for all the other refugees that we create all over the world. But anyway, listen, I strayed a wee bit there. More Chomsky.
Neither Ukraine nor Donbass, the Russian region, have implemented the agreement. The United States has not pressed Ukraine to implement the agreement. So there's problems on all sides. But if Europe had a really independent role in world affairs, it could be acting in such a way as to bring this Minsk II agreement.
into place. He's going to say, and this is he's referencing the EU and the lack of genuine power, it would seem, that the EU doesn't have, or it doesn't seem to be able to want to exercise. There's one thing, as I said, giving tacit support, real support to an invasion of a country 3/4 away around the world. It's not generally going to come back to haunt you. Can't say that about this.
Into operation, that would probably resolve the crisis. There's very good scholarship on this. One of the main scholars of the region, Anatol Yevin, has just written several articles about it, pointing out in detail how implementation of Minsk II could very likely resolve the crisis. Of course, that would mean withdrawal of the U.S. call for Ukraine to join NATO. It would mean that Ukraine would have sort of Austrian-style neutrality, the kind that Austria had right through the Cold War, not part of any military alliance. It would mean that there'd be some kind of federation in Ukraine, which would provide a degree of autonomy to the Donbass region, demilitarization, a couple of other conditions. All of this is quite feasible, and it's very likely that it would simply end the crisis.
So, did you hear that? Did you hear what he's saying? The implementation of the Minsk II agreement. Now, the Minsk II agreement happened, pardon me, in 2016, and the Ukrainian government at the time, or before, was overthrown in a coup, basically. And the previous president was, but before the current guy, Zelensky, the previous guy was quite lefty, and he was sort of looking to make nice with Russia. And there's a lot of people in Ukraine don't want to do that, which again, it's the old empire, so I sympathise with that. But they're your neighbour. That's my point. You have to be nice. England and Scotland and Wales are our neighbour. You can't not be nice. We got to trade with each other. We got to, the Britain or England decided it didn't want to do that with Europe is self-defeating, but that's its own choice. So to rub your neighbour up the wrong way, it doesn't make any sense. Now, when your neighbour is one of the world's superpowers and has nuclear weaponry and one of the biggest armies in the world, it really doesn't make fucking sense at all to me. I think it's a bit silly. That said, so the 2014 government was overthrown in a coup, engineered by the American National NED. Is it the NED, National Endowment for Democracy? So it's basically they've been described as doing out in the open what the CIA used to do in private. So then the people in the Donbass region, you've heard this word, the Donbass. This is the part of Ukraine that directly borders Russia and the Lugansk region, and they're what's described as being ethnically Russian. So apparently they speak Russian as their first language, which kind of would make sense. Border in Russia, I guess it makes sense. So they decided that they didn't want to be a part of a Ukraine that was going to join NATO, drift ever rightwards to the right wing. They wanted this relationship with Russia, and they started to agitate, protest and what have you. Now, the Ukrainian government's response at the time, and for 8 solid years, was to attack them and bomb them. Now, this is something that you're not going to hear on any mainstream media. 14,000 Ukrainian citizens were killed by the Ukrainian government over that 8 years of bombing, which is still ongoing. 14,000. Now, we've got righteous sympathy for these Ukrainian refugees. It's heartbreaking. I saw a photograph the other day of a wee girl starting school in Mayo, and I nearly cried. Honestly, it just reminded me of my own daughter. I nearly cried. I mean, you don't have to be reminded of your own child to have any sympathy, but it just did, and it nearly made me cry. And so, what I mean to say is, where was all the sympathy for those Ukrainian citizens, the 14,000 of them, 14,000 that have been murdered and shelled by their own government? That's before we get on to the Afghanis and the Syrians and the Libyans and the Iraqis, right? So then this we're up to 2016. Then in an attempt to bring about agreement, they have the Minsk II agreement. That's what Chomsky's talking about. The Minsk II agreement. This agreement, this was what was agreed, that the Lugansk and the Donbass were going to be independent regions within this. So they're going to be like what's the word for Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland? Well, basically they have their own parliaments, that sort of a thing. Still within Ukraine, but independent. And that was the agreement. So you're going to stop bombing. This is going to happen, and we're going to stop agitating. You're going to stop bombing. And Russia's going to be happy with that. Again, you say, well, what the fuck's it got? Well, unfortunately, it's Russia, and they are next door to you, so you do have to take them into consideration, unless you're a half-wit. So that was the agreement. But the Ukraine government didn't honour it, and they still agitated to join NATO. That was a part of it as well. You're not going to join NATO, okay. They still agitated to join NATO, and they still carried on the bombing. So that's what Chomsky is talking about. If this Minsk II agreement was implemented, he's suggesting that it would stop the war. What do you think? And apparently now Putin, what I've heard since this Chomsky interview, is that Putin has said, no, Minsk II isn't good enough. Now, you got to remember, this would have been at the start of the invasion. So, Minsk II isn't good enough. These regions have to go full independent for him to stop. So, he's up the stakes. I don't know. I would tend to agree with Chomsky there, but there you go. What do I know? More of Chomsky. Hold on.
That's not what's happening. The United States, under strong internal pressure from right-wing and also centrist opinion, is moving towards intensifying the crisis. So is Putin, by putting troops surrounding Ukraine, 100,000 of them. So it's, as Yevgen himself says, this is the most dangerous crisis in the world right now, and also the most easily settled. It's both. Now this goes back.
The most dangerous and the most easily settled.
Back much farther to the question of the means by which NATO was expanded. You go back to the collapse of the Soviet Union. There were several conceptions of how the Eurasia region should be organized. One of them, which was advanced by Mikhail Gorbachev and by Germany, Hans-Dietrich Genscher, the German foreign minister, both of them proposed a kind of Eurasian security system with no military blocks. Okay, so Lisbon to Vladivostok, singles, a region, no military blocks. Well, that was rejected by the United States. It was actually supported by Germany. A core part of this was unification of Germany, which the Germans, of course, wanted. And the question was how this could take place. Remember, for Russia, unification of Germany is not a trivial matter. Germany alone had virtually destroyed Russia several times during the past century. So for Russia to agree, as Gorbachev did, to agree to allowing Germany to be unified within NATO, hostile military alliance, was quite a concession. But there was a condition. Condition was that NATO would not expand to the east. The phrase that was used was not 1 inch to the east. That meant East Germany. Nobody was contemplating broader expansion, at least in public. Maybe privately they were. NATO did advance to East Germany under Bush, and under Clinton, it moved all the way to the Russian border. Baltic states, other states, Balkan states. These are pretty, it could have been done in a way which would have eliminated, certainly eased tensions. There was what was called the Partnership for Peace in the 1990s, which was a pretty sensible approach that contemplated expanding NATO or another general alliance to include the East European states, but to do it in stages, with varying from country to country depending on the circumstances, taking Russian concerns into consideration, even contemplating bringing Russia itself into this system, as incidentally Putin has suggested. These were all possibilities. They were abandoned in favor of what was called the Clinton Doctrine. Let's just expand militarily right to the border of Russia, militarizing, bringing them into NATO, weapon systems that are called defensive, but of course threaten Russia. All of this was done in a manner which was almost guaranteed to increase tensions. We're now facing it. Ukraine is a central part. And what's happening, as Yevon correctly says, is extremely dangerous, but also has a solution, one in which Europe would play a central role. But that, of course, requires that Europe take up the option, which it has always had, to become an independent force in world affairs. Europe has that option. It's rejected it. It's chosen to be subordinate to the United States. And as long as Europe does that, we'll be in serious danger.
There we go. What do you think of that? So that's Chomsky giving us real quick the broad picture. I'm going to try and flesh it out a little bit for you. So he referenced there Europe should be able to stand up to the United States, and absolutely it should. Europe is one of the biggest. The European Union is one of the biggest economies in the world, behind the US and China. Then it's the EU, I believe. So we're able to. We've got there's the financial muscle. You know, we're not a client state of the US, although European Union acts like it a lot of the time. Another thing that Chomsky doesn't mention there, but the EU gets 25% of its natural gas from Russia. Germany gets 45% of its natural gas from Russia. We've already seen, from Chomsky did that interview 2 weeks ago to today, we know about what's going on at the fuel pumps all over the world because of this. Well, it's not largely because of this. I mean, a large part of this is down to corporate greed, as we well know. But the gas that Russia hasn't sold, the wheat that Russia hasn't sold, and the metals, because it provides a lot of metals, xenon, all various gases and things that are used in the manufacturing process. It's already sold it elsewhere. So the sanctions that we put on Russia, or that have been put on Russia, I guess they will work, I suppose. But what it will do, it will refocus Russia to go, right, well, we can't rely on this now. We've got it somewhere else. And they've done it already. They've been kicked out of the SWIFT system, which is the global banking exchange, set up based all around the American dollar, of course. Well, China have been working for 7 years to set up their own, and they've got it done. And now Russia, China, Venezuela, Cuba, India, Brazil, not Brazil, Nicaragua, and a few other South American countries, and some African countries are now all going to start trading on this. So this is all a part of the thing that's going to break the hegemony of the United States. And this is what I don't understand. This is what I don't get. And I'm about, because when these things were happening, I was able to look and go, that's not going to work out well. That's going to, I mean, I think all these things are going to come back and bite the West in the ass. Russia is the biggest wheat producer in the world, as is Ukraine is one of them as well. Now, Russia is one of the biggest fertilizer producers in the world. Russia sends $1 billion of fertilizer to go onto US fields. The US alone gets $1 billion of fertilizer from Russia, and that's what goes on the fields in the US to grow all the crops. Now, what are American farmers going to do without that? Because it's not happening. They're not getting it. That's it. It's game over. Now, what's that going to do to food prices next year when there's no fucking food being grown in America? What's it going to do to the average German who isn't going to be able to heat their house? Not because they can't afford the gas, but because there is none. 45% of your natural gas comes from Russia. No, it doesn't. And that's what I didn't understand. And that's what, when Chomsky's talking about why Europe is complicit in this, why they seem to be prepared to allow the US agitate for this, and they have been agitating for this for decades. I believe, and I was talking with someone and they said, well, what's the bigger picture? I don't think there is a bigger picture. I think this is temporary. It's temporary thinking. Because all the vested interests, the gas companies, the oil companies, the military-industrial complex, have been eternally rewarded for small thinking. The guys on the stock exchange, the people, the CEOs that run the big corporations, everything's about a quick profit. Turn it round now. They get their bonuses based on the returns for the past 6 months, not the past 10 years. So they don't think long term. You look at the bonanza that the military-industrial complex has had in Afghanistan. A literal bonanza. Look at over the past 20 years, where they managed to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. Boys on bikes and wearing sandals. You know, it was, you know, we were all against it. We all knew it was bullshit. Nothing we could do about it. And now the US has looted the Afghan treasury. Whenever they left Afghanistan, there was $7 billion in the bank in the Afghan treasury. Yep, I just got an article here. $7 billion, and the Biden administration basically took that as it left. It abandoned the country overnight. The Afghan leader of the American base in Kabul basically turned up to work, and there was no one there. Literally, that's what happened. He had no idea. He didn't know what had happened. The Americans just left overnight. So here's an article. Why is the White House stealing $7 billion from the Afghans? This is written by Mustafa Bayoumi, and this is in The Guardian. Last week, the White House has issued an executive order announcing the theft of some $7 billion. Shocking to be sure, but more shocking still was its same executive order also identified the thief, the White House. In a move that can only be described as brazenly immoral and utterly unconscionable, the Biden administration has begun a process to seize more than $7 billion of assets from the Central Bank of Afghanistan. That the Central Bank of Afghanistan has on deposit in the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Since the Taliban gained control of the war-ravaged country last year, that money has been frozen in place. Now the administration has concocted its own mega-grift, planning to spend half of the money, not their money, for humanitarian aid in Afghanistan, whilst reserving the other half of the funds, not their money, for relatives of the September 11 victims who have brought claims against the Taliban for the 2001 terrorist attack. Now, not only is that nuts, you'd think the Americans would be giving Afghanistan money for what they've done, not just taking it, but what they're actually in the process of causing is a famine. So, of course, I'll skip. I'm not going to read the whole article; it's quite long. Just read you one more little paragraph. On the contrary, the people of Afghanistan are facing an economic collapse that is gargantuan in scope. A prolonged drought, the ravages of the pandemic, and the freezing of Western aid since the Taliban seized power last year has left the country in a shambles. At least 95% of households in the country are not consuming enough food to sustain themselves. 1 million Afghan children face acute hunger. 3 million suffer from malnutrition, and almost 750,000 people who were displaced from their homes from last year's fighting in a country where 4 million people have been internally displaced. So they're causing a literal famine in Afghanistan. They're already causing one in Yemen. The Saudis are fighting a sectarian war against their neighbour in Yemeni. And the Yemeni people are a different version of Islam, I guess. And it's all been done with British and American weaponry. The Americans are refueling Saudi planes in order to go and conduct their bombing raids. This has been going on for 4 years. It's the biggest. It's one of the. The displacement of the Ukrainian people. I think it's technically the biggest emergency on earth at the minute. But I think before that it was the Yemeni one. So, and if you remember when when the Americans left Afghanistan, can you remember how sudden that was? They just went, right, that's boom, they're gone. There was rumours of rumours, and then that boom, it happened. Then they almost immediately turned towards Russia and Ukraine. And this is my point, and this is what I asked you to listen to at the very beginning of this. Let me finish my point. The people of Ukraine and Russia, I get to a lesser degree, are going to be much lesser degree, are going to be the ones that are going to pay the price for this. It's not the rich, it's not the Americans, it's not the military-industrial complex, it's not the gas and oil companies, it's not Vladimir fucking Putin. It's the worker, the normal, average Ukrainian citizen, the 5/8 like you and me. They're the ones that are going to pay the price. They're the ones that are having to pack up with few belongings they can put into a backpack and walk across borders into other countries. I saw some school children being applauded turning up at a school in Italy, and they were crying. These Ukrainians don't speak Italian, I guess. They were only babies themselves. They looked like 6 or 7 or 8 years of age. I saw that little girl and turn up at a school in Mayo, and they will be adored and they will be supported and they will get given all the support that they need and hopefully and deserve, obviously, and that's great. And long may it continue. Well, long may it not continue. Hopefully they'll be back in their own countries soon. But it's very definitely much a second best option. The best place for these people is to live their lives in the country of their birth, until they choose, or not forced to by a Russian fucking tank, to flee. And that's my point. That's where I'm coming from. I hate this for all the reasons that you hate it, but you must understand the context. And the context around this, the collapse of the Soviet Union, they demand no NATO expansion, which is not unreasonable when you think about, if you're Russia, whatever. And the NATO has broke that promise 14 times up to now. The Ukraine is the straw that would break the camel's back. As Chomsky said, no Russian leader could agree or sit back and allow Ukraine to join NATO. Now, say it again. What the fuck's it got to do with? Well, it's got a lot to do with it. You can't. If Russia, let's imagine that Russia the USSR put nuclear weaponry or missiles in Cuba, nuclear weapons in Cuba. I mean, imagine what would happen. No, we don't have to, because they did it, and we almost ended up in World War III. Mutually assured nuclear annihilation in 1962. The Cuban Missile Crisis. So we know what happens whenever these big superpowers get fucking rubbed the wrong way. We know what they're capable of doing. So to do it and then act fucking shocked. Russia has been warning, don't do this, since the fall of the Soviet Union. All these countries have joined NATO. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Slovenia, Croatia, Montenegro, Albania, North Macedonia, and Bulgaria. But the straw that broke the camel's back was Ukraine, and they were warned about it, and no one's standing up to it. I was making a point a moment ago where I said, what was the long-term thinking? There is no long-term thinking. This is about flooding money upwards to the already wealthy. The greediest creatures that have ever existed are going to be walking away with more and more and more of taxpayers' money. The military-industrial complex, the gas and oil companies. That's what this is about. They're prepared to turn Ukraine into an Afghani dust bowl in order to create a theatre in which this money goes to these animals. And who's going to pay the price of it? The working people of Ukraine. The ordinary people of Ukraine are the victims of all of this, and they're the ones that are going to continue to be the victim. The man that works in the corner shop, the school teacher, the nurse, they're going to pay the price in order for these interests, these establishment vested interests, to continue to funnel the $780 billion that America spends on its budget, more than the next 10 countries combined on its military, what they call a defense budget. No one's attacking them because Russia doesn't want what America wouldn't stand for. If Russia put missiles in Canada or Mexico, what do you think would happen? As I said, we don't need to imagine. We know, because it happened in 1962 with the Cuban Missile Crisis. And again, everybody acknowledged that it was a mistake. After the fact, the Russians admitted it, Castro admitted it. Kennedy he says, you get the fuck. We will attack you if you don't move them. And they nearly did. So that's a part of the context. And then the NATO expansionism, the funneling of public monies into these corporations. I don't want to talk too much about the ethnic thing. People are saying, the Russians and the ethnic Russians in the Donbass and the Lugansk. I don't really want to talk too much about it because that's real. I think that gets really complicated when you start getting into stuff like that. But we do know that people in those areas apparently some people in those areas apparently identify as sort of being ethnically Russian. Well, I don't think that's controversial to say at all. That is true. 2014, fueled by the National Endowment for Democracy, an organisation that does out in the open what the CIA used to do in private, engineered, organised, supported a coup in which the democratically elected president of Ukraine was overthrown because he was making nicey-nicey with Russia, and the US doesn't want that. And NATO, must be said, doesn't want that. And they continue the bombing, or they start the bombing of those regions, in which 14,000 Ukrainians have been killed by the Ukraine government. Check it out. Don't believe me, check it out. 14,000. All the things that Russia is doing now, that you're seeing on the news, bombing a fucking hospital, unconscionable. All these things, the Ukraine government have done it to their own citizens in Ukraine, albeit separatist citizens, but citizens nonetheless. They come to an agreement in 2016, which they said they will have their devolved. That's the fucking word I was looking for. Devolved. They'll be devolved. So they'll have their own parliament, but they'll still be in Ukraine. We're not going to go for the NATO thing, and they didn't. They went. They agreed. They signed the thing, and they didn't implement it. And all the while, Russia is going, do not join NATO. And now it looks like that's what's going to happen. And that could be something. I think Russia actually invading took everybody by surprise. But everybody was, even Chomsky and everybody was saying they didn't think they were going to do it. So now you end up, the world is in a state where we can't afford to put diesel in our cars. There's going to be a food shortage all over the place. Russia is a huge economy. It does provide a lot of the world with a lot of its natural resources. Russia's natural resources. The Americans have since sent, this is hilarious, they've sent a delegation to Venezuela just the other day to ask Nicolas Maduro to open up the taps and provide more oil to the United States, because it's going through the roof, $4 a gallon or something. I believe that's a lot. Apparently that's a lot in America. I don't know. And it's not. There's the midterm elections are coming up in America this year, 2022. Joe Biden will have been in power for 2 years. Midterm elections are this year, and one thing, the Yanks is a very heavily car reliant country. All our countries, all our economies are like, everyone drives everywhere. People can't afford to put fucking fuel in their car. So they've gone to Venezuela, a country that is under sanctions, a country that, according to Amnesty International, the US sanctions have caused 100,000 deaths through lack of medicines and other things. And Venezuela suffered greatly at the start of the pandemic because they couldn't get much, and same as Cuba, they couldn't get a lot of the medicines that they needed to import, things like needles, to give vaccines to people because of the sanctions. So Biden has sent two envoys to Venezuela in order, and I think it is absolutely fucking hilarious. Now, if I was Nicolas Maduro, I would say Juan Guaido, the puppet, who they had tried to coup Maduro with and put in place, is now, we're putting him in jail. 2, give us our money back, because the US done to, and Britain, by the way, done to Venezuela what the US is doing now to Afghanistan. They took their sovereign wealth. There was $1 billion, I think, of $1 billion in gold in the Bank of England. It was just confiscated, and there was deposits in a few different places, and with the Americans and they could get their hands on it, they just took it. Give me that back. I want that money back. I want all these sanctions lifted, and then we will sell you our oil at the market rate, the way it should have been right from the fucking start. Is that not fair? I think that's fair. So I think that's hilarious. I can't imagine the embarrassment of those American envoys having to go and beg Maduro, and also recognise Maduro and get the EU to do the same, because obviously the Yanks can get the EU to do anything. Get the EU to do the same, to recognise Maduro as the lawful and legitimate president of Venezuela, which he is. All the talks about election interfering is all bullshit. So there you go. I think I kind of covered it. And the reason that I bring up the other countries is because this is a bloody disaster. But who's it a disaster for? It's the normal person. It's the 5/8. It's you and me. We're the ones that are paying extra for everything. We're already in a cost of living crisis that's been manufactured. And now we've gone from, in this country, we had 6 years of Brexit, in which me and my country were completely fucking ignored, despite screaming from the rooftops about the impending disaster that could happen. Then we go straight into a pandemic, and we come straight out of that, and we're now we're looking at World War III, and the poor people of Ukraine being refugeed, if that's a word, out of their own country, which is fucking tragic. And then we see also a big part of what's going on, a part of the sanctions that's happening. There's literal xenophobia being carried out at official state level on Russia and all things Russian. The University of Milan has banned Dostoyevsky, the Russian author, the dissident author who died 150 years ago, never knew anything about the Soviet Union or anything approaching it. The university, or the Cardiff Philharmonic has banned Tchaikovsky. They're not playing any Tchaikovsky. Again, another guy that died 180 years ago. This is fucking nonsense. Roman Abramovich. I am actually really pissed off about this. You know what I think about billionaires, right? Happily walk them all to the gallows myself. Why am I defending a fucking billionaire? Roman Abramovich, the billionaire owner of Chelsea Football Club, has been sanctioned out of the United Kingdom. What has he done? If he's done something, bring him to court. If he's guilty of something, bring him to court. By all, abso-fucking-lutely. And listen, you don't get to be a billionaire by being a nice guy, so I don't think it's going to be too difficult to fucking find something to pin on him. But just in the space of 2 weeks, the man, he's Chelsea Football Club's up for sale. In the same week that Saudi Arabia, or the same year that Saudi Arabia bought Newcastle Football Club a couple of months back, Saudi Arabia is committing a genocide in Yemen, and the day before yesterday beheaded 81 people in public in Saudi Arabia. Beheaded them. And this is nuts, because yesterday Chelsea and Newcastle played each other in the Premier League. And a tale of two fucking clubs you couldn't... One of them, their owner, is basically exiled out of the UK. I think he's gone to live in either Portugal or Israel, I'm not sure. I think he has citizenship in both of those countries. He's a Jewish fellow as well. Roman Abramovich. His club has been forced. He's walked away. The club owe him £1 billion of debt that he's just walking away from. He said he doesn't want to. Whoever buys the club doesn't need to worry about that. He just wants to see the club do well. Again, not trying to make him out to be a good guy. I sound like I am. I'm fucking not. He's a prick. He's a billionaire. He's not a nice guy. But what has he done? Just because he's Russian? Is that it? Russian restaurants getting fucking attacked. There was I heard on the radio the other night, an owner of a Russian deli sort of thing. He sells Russian products or Eastern European products, some of which are Russian. It must be called the Russian deli or something. The man's been getting death threats because he sells Russian fucking sausages or something. It's fucking ridiculous. Again, not defending Russia. What they've done is fucking unbelievably unconscionable, evil, and I hope that somebody ends up in a dock at The Hague for this. But give the thing context and calm down the fucking xenophobia. It is unbelievable. Now, whilst we're also on the subject, we're talking about other nations. Where's the sympathy for the Afghanis? Where's the sympathy for the Cubans and the Venezuelans and the Libyans and the Syrians? America is currently occupying 1/3 of Syria. 1/3 of Syria. It has just walked away from a 20-year occupation of Afghanistan, and it's standing there wagging its finger at Russia. The hypocrisy makes me want to puke. I'm serious about that. I fucking cannot believe it. And I can't believe people are falling for it. The mainstream media is gone. It's a waste of fucking time. It has completely fucking lost the plot. It is bought and paid for, I should say. But who is going to pay for this? The working man and woman across the world is going to pay in inflated prices. Some unions in England have just negotiated a 10% pay rise. They were offered 4, they rejected it, went on strike, they got 10. B&Q warehouse workers in England. By the time they get that pay rise, it's not going to be enough. They're going to need to fucking double it or triple it. But ultimately, who's going to pay the price of this? Who is paying the price of this? The average Ukrainian. The working man and woman, the children of Ukraine, the poor of Ukraine. They're the ones that are going to pay the biggest price, that are paying the biggest price. But what we must ask ourselves is why, who are they paying it to? The money, it's all about money, Lebowski, and it's all going upwards. And that's where my sympathy lies. Always does. I see the world through a working class lens. And yeah, so there we go. I hope I've given you a little bit of context. That's me done. I'm going to stop talking. Again, I'm going to finish this with the way I started it. I am not an apologist for what Russia has done. Don't come at me. If you come at me with that, you're a fucking idiot, because that's not what I've said. But people are losing their fucking minds out there. I went to a door the other day and a woman says, what do you think of this thing in Ukraine? And she says, I think he's just like Putin. It's just like Hitler and someone should kill him. I said, where the fuck did you put that in your head? Where did you get that from? I don't believe that wee woman woke up in the morning and went, I think we should just murder someone. This is what she's listening to on some radio shows or TV programs or news shows. Reading it in newspapers. Assassin. You fucking mental. People are losing their minds out there. People are afraid. My daughter, my child, my youngest 17, Daddy, are we going to war with Russia? No, I'm not going to fucking war with Russia. And she says, well, what if they bring in the national service, the conscription? I says, we'll be moving. You're not conscripting. You're not going to go and fight anybody. Don't worry about it. A 17-year-old girl, all she gives a shit about is singing and her mates. It's tragic. So don't be coming at me. I didn't say what you... If you think you heard me say something, you didn't. Go back and listen. And that's us done. So, that's me. I'm done. I'm out of... No culture today, because it's... I forgot to load something culture-y, so I'll do an extra bit of culture-y. So there we go. So I hope that's okay for you. Toodle pip, everybody. Have fun. Love one another. And don't fall for the lies.